Well, welcome everyone. We're going to give about 3 minutes for everyone to get into the room here, and then we'll get started. So if you need that second cup of coffee, feel free, or first cup of coffee, feel free to grab it. All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm going to get us started. And of course, you are at the Howard County Chamber of Commerce's YPN event. This morning it is called Celerate, which is our professional development committee. And we have about 4 professional development events a year. And our topic, of course, here is the finer points of public speaking. So, always wonderful when you're doing something on public speaking and your voice goes out. And hopefully we'll have great opportunities here to not just learn about public speaking, but we'll have a workshop dynamic as well. And so I'm going to introduce you to our first person, Lakey Boyd, who is the president and CEO of the Columbia Association. We'll talk to her in a minute about the finer points of public speaking and what lessons she's learned over her career. And then we'll go to Ron Hennigan with the Chesapeke Shakespeare Company, and we'll do an actual workshop component here as well. And so if you don't have your camera on for now, that's fine, but there will be a participatory part of this, assuming that you're willing to do that. And so feel free at about 9:30, we'll make that transition and you'll be able to practice what we've learned about. Before we jump into that interview with Lakey though, I want to just thank our sponsors, Dembo Jones, Howard Hughes, Long and Foster, and Christie's. And we have a Celerate sponsor for the year as well, McFarland Insurance. So thank you to them very much. Also, just so that you know, we do have some other upcoming events with the Chamber, and you have an opportunity to look at the website for the Chamber there and see those. All right, well, I failed to introduce myself. I am Zachary Cochran, the CEO of Cochran Coaching LLC, and I have my own business. I've been running for about 4 years to help young professionals figure out what their career path should look like. And I've joined the Chamber. I'm on the YPN's board, and I have the opportunity to also chair the committee for Celerate, our professional development committee. So with that, again, thank you for being here. It looks like just about everyone has arrived. This is a meeting format. And so what I'm going to do is spotlight Lakey in Zoom here during our interview. And I would love it, Lakey, if you would take a moment to introduce yourself and share your story on where you came from, because this is a new role for you. And
yes, welcome. So thank you. I have been at Columbia Association for right at a month. And as you can tell, I am, from New Zealand. So I'm not from here. I am transplanting from Atlanta and very excited to be here. We actually had targeted the move to this region And this opportunity was a unique role, an unusual time in a very special place. So by education, my background is city planning. I have a graduate degree in that, and then also an MBA in real estate. I have spent my career in the private sector, largely in consulting. I have served in local government, and I have been in nonprofit leadership, largely around mission-based organizations that have some kind of community service element. So I actually studied Columbia in graduate school as part of the Newtown movement, and it was intriguing to me when this position opened to really think about what is a planned community that purposefully included integration, that purposefully included inclusion and connection to community, and did that in the built environment, but also did that in terms of kind of the social infrastructure that was set up at the time. What is that 50 years later? How do you update it and make it relevant today? What elements still fit? What can change? So that's a big part of the appeal to me. I have hit the ground running. Lots is going on. I am kind of coming in, which is very typical in this kind of role, with many things in motion. It's a very complex organization. We have a lot of operations. There's internal work, there's external work, but connecting to the community is very important to me. And so when I got this invitation very early, I was like, well, if it's young professionals, I'm in, because I really want to make sure that we're reaching out and staying relevant however we can. I can say the other element about my background, that's kind of the more professional side. At my core, I'm a learner. I love connecting to people. It's what makes my work interesting and makes the rest of my life interesting. So I think that I'm excited in being in a new place. We have relocated before, and having been a consultant, I've worked in a lot of communities. So I love to learn about a new place. Every place has a certain character and community. So I'm really excited to figure out Columbia, and with my family relocating here as well, kind of what our new lifestyle is going to be, and what the future holds for us. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And for those who are not Columbia natives, what would you say about the Columbia Association, particularly, how large, how many employees do you have? Just as some background as well for those who don't know.
So we are just over 50 years, almost 55, and was started as the master plan community got off the ground. So part of the setup is that there are 10 villages, but then we have operations around open space, which is our facilities and pathways, and large areas of preservation and conservation, wooded or streams. Then we have community services, so a lot of youth-oriented services there, but also the Lakefront Summer Series, and then also sports and fitness, a pretty big diversity there in terms of both facilities, like fitness centers, but then also ice skating rink and golf courses. So in terms of total size, we are about 200 year-round employees, and that can flex up seasonally to even 800 in kind of peak season. We're not at that right now with COVID. And then organizationally, our current budget is about 65 million. It was more like 85 million prior to COVID. So we're kind of like all organizations coming out of that and figuring out both what did we have to drop during COVID out of a resource allocation necessity, but then what do we want to do differently as we come out and define the next normal, which is a big part of the piece to me that I'm bringing in with, part of my background, Scrum Master, Scrum Product Owner, like a lot of that lean agile thinking. How can we apply that to community organization?
It's wonderful. So that was kind of a pop quiz, right? Because you've only been at this for a month.
I know some key numbers. I can't tell you everything.
Impressive. So you as a CEO, right, you have public speaking just as a part of your job. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about public speaking, do you still get nervous when you are getting ready to get in front of an audience?
So I would say yes, and anybody that, doesn't, I don't know if, their heart is beating at the right pace. I think that you have to figure out where to put it. That's the best, advice I can give. And I mean, even being a mother, that's something that, I'm doing with my daughter. Fear exists, nervousness exists. It's where do you put it in order of your feelings? And as soon as it gets to the front of the line, unless it really is keeping you safe, right? Because the lion is about to attack you. It really is about, okay, is the opportunity bigger? Am I more excited? Is this a pivot point in my life or in my career? So you move that nervousness further back down the line. So there's always, I think it's healthy to have a little bit of, means you're alive, awake, you're ready to go.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're talking to us from your office here in
Mm-hmm.
Columbia Association. And so have you started having opportunities now in the pandemic to speak both in person and virtually? And what's the distinction as you have experienced that between sort of that live and in person and then this more like, oh, am I even seeing everyone on the screen kind of context?
So I will say, I've worked during the whole pandemic. I was in local government at the beginning of it, and then did consulting as we were kind of figuring out, the relocation. I will say that longer meetings that would work in person, almost workshop type format, are really, really difficult on virtual. And I think as the speaker, if you're presenting, if it's not an engagement meeting, like, a team meeting, and you are carrying the weight of that energy and trying to bring it through a screen to people that you can tell, are looking at other things or getting up and leaving. It is, to me, more draining. I've done training with a Urban Land Institute program. I helped pilot and run it, and I did training for it kind of across the country. And I can feel like sometimes in longer virtual meetings, like I had done a full day training. So I think virtually, at least for me, I really like the connection and engagement with the audience. So I feel an energy coming back, the nodding heads, the smiles, or even the shaking heads where you're kind of like, okay, let me come back around this way. So it's been a challenge. By far, the most challenging is hybrid, because we're in that now and we're kind of starting to figure that out, even with like our board of directors meetings. And it's such a split, and mentally it's a split, but even just managing conversation and that kind of thing. But I haven't really, I've started in-person meetings here, fully vaccinated and have my full immunity. But it is, we're not kind of at that big scale yet. So what are we going to keep from the virtual world? There's lots of positives. And then what do we need to reconnect in person? A community organization, we definitely are going to have to reconnect in person.
Right. And to our audience members, you're going to have an opportunity in a few minutes to ask her some questions. And so if you have any questions or you're thinking of any, go ahead and jot those down either in the chat or if you want to remember them, or just hold those. In about 10 minutes, I'll ask for your questions. So with that, how did you develop this knack for being able to speak publicly? And were there certain milestones in your career where you said, oh, that gave me a lot of experience because I was giving presentations all the time and, got to be more comfortable with the process?
Mm-hmm. So as I've thought about, just kind of talking about this and looking back, I think I had what I would guess is somewhat typical. So as I started out from, after graduate school, and I'm so excited and eager, and I'm sure I have figured out, how the universe works. I was working for someone else, right, to prepare presentations, do all the research and analysis and all that. But in dating myself, we were definitely at the beginning of the PowerPoint presentations, and how do you take that report and put it into PowerPoint? How do you distill the information, that kind of thing. My boss at the time was definitely good at being in front of a group and presenting. And so I would travel with him a lot. But on the other hand, his style was not meshing because of the kind of the change in how we were doing things with having real data available and not just talking to a room. So I think that watching that and really being at a transition point in the way people were communicating helped me understand that we still, the data and the research, the content is super important, but you know, whether you call it storytelling or whether it's just how do I get you to relate to the information, I think that subtext came through for me. I will say that as prepared as I thought I was sitting and watching somebody do it, and you know, we were still having the projectors that you had to, you know, they had a big case and it was like a roller suitcase. The first time I got up to do it was like, whoa, it is a very different experience. As much as you sit in the front of the room and you're like, oh, I would say this, and oh, that, you know, you should have said this when you were asked this question. So I would say you definitely want to practice. And, you know, I'm a big believer, is it Toastmasters? Is it, you know, like the opportunity today with the workshop? I also believe and have seen a lot of good results from improv comedy classes and just being able to learn how to think on your feet. I think all of those are useful, but you want to find opportunities to practice and find that in all parts of your life. You have that opportunity, but getting up in front of a room, the best thing you can do is the first several times you do it, be talking about something you know and you really enjoy or you love. You'll be a lot more comfortable because it's still a strange experience because you've got to find your own style, find your own energy, figure out how you're going to connect.
That's great. So I'm curious of if you have any stories that are really memorable speaking moments. And after I ask that, I'm going to ask about some of the tips and tricks, or you know, the more logistical elements.
And by memorable, you mean, I assume, did I fail big time in front of a big group?
Whatever you're comfortable sharing, but I'll share as a, you know, as a lead in on that. So I ran for student body president when I was in college. And at one point I went up to the boardroom and I talked in front of the board of trustees for the entire college. And I just wilted. Like, I had so much trouble. I like turned beet red. My one saving grace in the room was this one guy who just locked eyes with me and like tried to listen through my embarrassment as everyone else was just doing this because they were so embarrassed for me. And so it was a kind of a traumatic experience, but memorable in the sense that I was like, okay, I could have been better prepared for that, and I will prepare more for my next conversation.
So a couple things come to mind. I think the one that was unexpectedly jarring for me, and Ron, I'm sure can relate in a very different way, was I was getting, so this is mid-career. I mean, I'd been doing this for quite some time and felt totally comfortable. It's a big town hall type format, you know, I don't know, maybe 500 people in an auditorium. And I got up for my portion and they turned it into theater lights. And what that means is the room went black. And I was not expecting that. I had not been in a true, like, we'd been in auditoriums plenty of times, but they always leave the lights on either fully or at least partially. And I suddenly got up there and it was like everyone disappeared. And it was like this really surreal mind experience because I'm trying to share information and connect to the audience, right? I'm not trying to perform, you know, a vignette in front of someone. So that was really strange. And I started moving through it and frankly was getting disoriented, that I finally stopped and just said, hey, can we get the lights back on out here? Because that actually is important to me to be able to see folks. And they came back on and it was totally fine. So I think that part of, it's always important to be real and be human, you know, in that moment. I think that's very important. But a different one that comes to mind, in a different memorable way, probably in a more positive way, was, and imagine this, I did work in Utah. And so of course they did not know what to make of me. I was several years in, but not mid-career at this point. And it was such a different community because I had at that point largely worked in the Southeast, and a lot of that dynamics were different. And this was an entire town effort. And so we were at the culminating end of the week. We'd been doing all these workshops, and now we're making the big presentation to the entire town. And it was a small town, the whole, you know, it was like the whole town was there. And I started presenting, and I had a lot of like socioeconomic information. And I just had a moment where I stepped back and said, you know what these numbers say to me is, at the end of the day, this is really about family, and this is about, and I started kind of connecting that socioeconomic information to kind of people's everyday lives. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I got such positive feedback from that experience that, you know, that really was a big transition point in my style of, instead of trying to be so polished and so like, I've got to be professional, letting some of that, you know, personality come through, has really been a transition. And kind of, as you can tell, I'm rather informal, and I want to kind of have a conversation. I'm not super formal and polished. I can be, but I don't find it as effective.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because as we get into the tips, that anything you'd like to share on as far as your best practices go, I was thinking about the way that I've gone about these types of moderating these events before, and I'll over prepare, and I'll, you know, write out a script, and I'll go through and I'll have my questions, and I'll share my questions in advance, and it feels very choreographed and stiff. And so I figured, you know what, I'll practice. I'll try something new this time. Let's have a more informal dialogue. So you didn't get anything other than just a, hey, this is Zachary. Really, we didn't really prepare before this.
Right.
And so I think that at least for me, allowed me to help practice this more informal, you know, interview type context.
Good.
So I look at every opportunity, and I probably speak publicly once a month, and have for the last 4 years, as just a learning opportunity. So
yeah,
to your tips or tricks
okay,
or best practices, anything that you'd like to share?
And I tried to, you know, actually make a couple of notes. So I've touched on several. I cannot overstate, you do have to be prepared. Now, Zachary, to your point, I'm not talking about over preparation, but you better know your content, and you better know it better than your audience. Now, I'm a big believer, if you're well prepared and you get to the edge of your knowledge, admit it. You know, I don't know, I'll follow up with you, but you don't just prepare what's on a note card or what you think is in a slide deck. You've got to prepare, where do I want this audience to be? What do I want my customer to know when I'm at the end of this presentation? So always have in mind what you want them walking out of that meeting with, or your presentation with, and be sure you're steeped in that content. I do believe in practicing. Again, your style, do you write it out? Do you use notes? Do you do bullet points? It is shocking the difference with people that practice. And when I say practice, I don't mean, you know, reading something aloud by yourself. I'm talking about, you know, standing up, if that's what you're going to be doing. I really believe in it in slide decks, because you'll actually find as you talk an awkwardness, and you'll go, wait a second, I actually need to put that earlier in the slide deck if I want to kind of stitch these points together. I think that the ability to respond in the moment as a real human, I mean, I've already said that, but I can't overstate it. You know, things will go wrong. So be prepared in practicing, but have the backup plan. You know, the computer's not going to work, the speaker's going to go out, the volume in the room is going to be bad, random things are going to happen in the room. I mean, doing community work over the years, I've done the meetings in the gymnasiums and had something go wrong, come in and like basketball practice is happening and we've got to move the room that we already laid out how we were going to set it up. Again, back in the day, the projector light, I distinctly remember one time that went out. We had about 1,000 people in the auditorium, the gymnasium, and there was no backup light. And so we had this whole presentation and but it's important to like scurry around and figure it out, have a backup plan, and then take a moment, connect with the audience and say, so this just happened, life just happened to us. Here's what we're going to do. And I think people respect that, but then you need to be smooth and be ready with a backup plan to keep going. I've actually seen people fold when they couldn't get their presentation to work. And we're like, well, we'll just have to do it another time. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. If you can't, particularly if you're trying to sell me something, you better be ready. You should be able to do this in your sleep. So I think you just got to know what's going to happen. Don't panic when it happens. Be ready to say, what do I do now? And then, kind of like I said, find your style. You're going to watch people and, certainly like the TED format's really big today. I've done some TED Talks. It's really different than kind of a more typical presentation, or if you're in a position of sales or anything like that. So I think that you can pick things up from people, but at the end of the day, what people are going to relate to is who you are and your belief in, what you're representing and how you connect. I think that's what people respond to. So I will say, particularly since this is a young professional group, that you really have to believe in what you're doing. And if you find yourself not able to do that, that might be kind of a critical moment in your career to kind of pause and say, am I at the right company? Am I doing the right thing? Because you will be so much more successful when you align with what really resonates with who you are.
Thank you. I was taking notes on that and great insights, but I want to give the opportunity for everyone else to ask some questions as well. And we're going to go not till 10 this morning, but till 10:15. So Ron will still get about 30 minutes, even if we go a little long on the questions. So I'm going to remove your spotlight, Lakey, and encourage everyone else, if you want to switch to your gallery view, you can see everyone. Feel free to jump back on camera if you've jumped off, because we're moving towards the participatory part. And if you have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask it. Or if you prefer, you can use the little reactions down below and raise your hand, and I will lower your hand and you acknowledge it and you can speak. But again, informal, feel free to just jump in and unmute yourself.
If you've covered this, I apologize because I came in a little late.
Okay.
And I can always be referred back to the video. But one thing for me that is a bit of a struggle is I'm constantly basically reintroducing myself at various networking events, Zoom meetings, reintroducing my company. What is my role? What is our mission? And is there a way that you can suggest to sort of make that more interesting to people? Shake it up a little bit, every couple of meetings, just something to make it seem less rehearsed and less rote.
Yes. And right, I think people can sense when you're like, well, let me tell you exactly what I do. So I will say that with a name like Lakey, I get the bonus that everybody always wants to be like, what did you just say? And where does that come from? So that's a little bit different. I think that when you're introducing your company, what you do, the way I look at that is that there are, I would guess, somewhere around 3 to 5 points that are key points. And I really pivot what I say and how I say it based on who I'm talking to. So, for instance, with Columbia Association, am I going to lead with open space? Or am I going to talk more about our village centers, right? Am I going to talk about how we're a really large, complex operational organization, or do I want people to feel like a resonance around community service? So I think that probably instead of kind of having that, you know, I say this every time, if you kind of had, here is my very small selection of points that I want to highlight, and just get comfortable with interchanging them, I think that can make it feel, as you were saying, kind of less rehearsed. That would be my main thought. And then otherwise, I also think it's important at networking, you know, less so in that initial introduction. You don't only have to talk about what you do professionally. I think you can connect things in, right? Like I shared earlier that I'm a learner. So what does that mean? I mean, I'm finishing up my yoga teacher training, right? Like that is not directly related to Columbia Association, but it's reflective of kind of how I'm built as a person, my worldview. But then you never know, somebody's like, oh, I love yoga, like let's talk about that. And then you end up coming back to the professional piece. So again, maybe you have a couple of those tidbits that you're comfortable sharing, and you offer that up. Like I think that's another way I have found connection that runs a little more personal, again, not deeply personal, actually help the connection.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Great answer. And Ron, I saw you'd raised your hand as well. No?
I just wanted to point out that, Lakey, thanks, because I think one of the things that you did, which is great, is you told us who you were, and at the same time, you probably have about 15 different versions of the same line, which is, you could tell that I'm from, and with me, when we met earlier, you said, you could tell I'm from New York, and then with this crowd, you said, you could tell I'm from New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think owning who you are and then owning your voice is another sort of aspect to understanding that public speaking is about you speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about some sort of ethereal concept of what public speaking is. It's no, it's your chance to tell us who you are. And so you've owned that. So I just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
Yes. And I would agree, Ron, that, for me, it was a process, because again, I felt like early on, I had to be really like, I'm going to do what I've seen people do. And it didn't resonate nearly as much, I found, over time.
Great. Other questions?
I will, if I can share one other quick tidbit as we transition, because I think it relates to where I assume Ron is going to take us. In mentioning the yoga, I think I'll mention, so I've done it for years. I did not start out yoga to, be a better public speaker. But what I have found is the breathing work, pranayama, and, all kinds of like cool, fun Sanskrit things. But the breath work ended up being so meaningful to me in, again, kind of that nervousness, putting it in order, and the ability to breathe, get back in the body, right? The breath is the connection, really the bridge between the mind and the body. And if you get nervous to the point of that mental frenzy, even just the centering breaths for 3, good deep breaths, eyes closed or unfocused, and getting back in your body is a really important piece to being centered. So I assume Ron is going to talk about breathing and, being in your body, but I will say that was an element that had no connection for me professionally, but ended up being of great benefit. So you just never know where those connections will be made.
Story. Other questions? We probably have time for a couple more.
What would you say is the best advice that you were given on public speaking early on, or kind of as a younger professional? Like, is there a piece, or did someone say something to you that was maybe not even related to public speaking, but it really stuck with you?
I think the be prepared in terms of really mastering your content, that was told to me. And then I think what I got that wasn't necessarily verbally said to me, but I watched, was as Ron was just sharing, really watching people that the audience remembered, or that a networking event people remembered and wanted to follow up with, they were people. They were a real person. They were not, you know, a suit and a jacket and a name tag. They were, something came through about them. And frankly, that took me a little while early in my career to kind of reconcile. Given my personal background, I came from, you know, challenging circumstances. I didn't have direct role models in my life. So I felt like I was really kind of figuring it all out. So I thought it was very important to like fit in a mold. And I have lived my way out of that. And I will tell you that the earlier you can figure that out, the better, in your life in general, but definitely in your professional life, I would say.
Great. Any last question? And yes, being comfortable with silence is probably another tip, right?
It is. I would definitely say that. You know, one thing I guess on an end note that I will say that can sound a little hokey, but I really think it matters is, you know, I think a lot of people, when that moment comes for the public speaking, it feels like the spotlight is on you. And, you know, in some ways, sure, but you really have to just flip your mind around to, it's really your opportunity to shine, right? To bring your light to that space. So you have to be comfortable with figuring that out. Prepare, practice, do all the things that we've talked about. Breathe as you're about to start, and then just be in the moment, and enjoy it, because you were invited to be there. You have an opportunity to be there. Something was set up for you to have that moment. So, you know, take it.
It's great. Great ending advice. And Lakey, I know that you were especially excited to join this morning because you're interested in getting to know more about the mindset of Columbia's young professionals, and you know, you kind of have questions for us and what we're thinking and what we are looking for. And so, how would you encourage people to connect with you, you know, after this, and what would that look like? What would be your preference?
Yes, so it is important to me. You know, it's not just something I say. It's important to me to connect definitely to, you know, our residents or people that work in our community. I will say that one of the things that I would not have guessed years ago, that I've really enjoyed, is having really having young professionals on my team that I have built relationships with and still stay in touch with, and have a mentoring type relationship of, you know, calling and saying, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to work through this, years later, watching their successful path. So if you're a Columbia resident or you work here and you have views on Columbia, frankly, positive or negative, I'd love to hear the positive, but I'll listen to the negative. I think it's very important for us to understand people's perceptions and experiences. But otherwise, you know, reach out if you really want to connect, if you feel like there's something in my background or what I do that could be beneficial for you. I make time for that on my calendar. I can't commit it's going to be next Tuesday, but I will make time for that on my calendar. So, you know, reach out and don't just say, I want to talk to you. Like, give me a little bit of your story as to why you want to connect, and I will make time to do that. So.
Great. Lakey, thank you so much. And I know your contact details are on the Columbia Association's website. You have a LinkedIn profile as well. So if people want to reach out to you, they can do that either of those ways. Well, officially, we're going to transition to Ron. And so again, Lakey, thank you so much. I know you wanted to stick around to participate in this part. And so, Ron, I'll let you introduce yourself. I'm going to spotlight you as I did before. And just by way of sort of introduction, right? I have no personal like experience of being on stage or being on Broadway in a professional context, but I did once play one of the characters in The Tempest for middle school. And the fun part about that being Ariel was I was a spirit, so they gave me a razor scooter to ride out onto the stage with so that I could float on and off the stage. So that was probably my only experience really, other than the Music Man, where I think I had 2 lines. But I'm really excited about this part, and let's see, feel free to just take it away.
You know, what you just noticed was Zach wants to audition. If you weren't paying attention, Zach secretly is yearning to get called in for the next Tempest that we do, because he's still got those Ariel lines memorized. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ron Hennigan. I'd like you to listen to this next little bit that I do because it'll be important. My name is Ron Hennigan, and I'm the Director of Education at the Chesapeke Shakespeare Company. I'm in charge of the student matinee program and our in-school residency program, as well as the studio here in downtown Baltimore, where every year we serve normally close to 18,000 students across the region. I believe that an enriching life, a full, complete life, involves lifelong learning. And I know that there is nothing more powerful than a group of people being in the same room, engaged in stories and tales and legends, both happy and sad, personal and public. And it is the one thing that has sustained us through thousands of years. Okay, so I introduced myself. And so that's one of the assignments that you're going to have coming out of today will be, I would like you to introduce yourself. Now, I introduced myself by giving you my full name and giving you my job title, which I think probably everybody on this call does on a semi-regular basis. We'll talk about the how of that in just a moment. Then what I followed with was a very logical description of this is what I do overall in a year. And there's probably one piece of information that you pulled out of that first bit. And I'm interested in what that piece of information was. So what I'll ask you to do is, if there was one piece of information in my introduction that you heard and you remember right now, I'd like you just to open up the chat. I'd like you to put whatever that piece of information is in the chat. And don't hit send yet. But go ahead and put that in. Is there one part of my introduction where you were like, oh, I remember this? Great. The second part, I talked about what I believed, and I talked about a life enriching and lifelong learning being part of it. And then the third part, I talked about what I know. And I deliberately used the word know because it has a nice round vowel sound. And I talked about being in the same room with a group of people. I talked about epic stories. I talked about genre. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're using the chat, could you go ahead and hit send on what you remember of what I just said about myself? Great. Awesome. Excellent, Karen. Thank you for the normally, because that is the sort of parenthetical expression that we've had to engage in over the past year. It's become sort of pro forma, but it's necessary every once in a while to sort of highlight that. So thank you for saying that. Yes, and look at you all. You all hit upon the 18,000 because that was a number, and you went, that I can remember. And so I think that there's probably something there about what it is that we, how we introduce ourselves. What I did, and Lakey's absolutely right, what I did is I gave you my name. I made sure that when I said it, I didn't phase out and I didn't belittle who I was, because some people might say, they wouldn't be me, but they might say, hi, my name is Ron Hennigan. And what they would do in vocally is that they would just sort of drop out with their name. And then that makes people go, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that. Or they make a judgment of, well, he didn't seem very confident, right? I also just finished with a nice little lift. I'm the director of education at the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. Why? Because I didn't want to fade away. I'm the director of education at the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. If you do that repeatedly, you'll notice that any audience that you're listening to will follow along, and then their heads will start to nod as they get more tired, and you slowly put them to sleep because the energy at the end of your line goes downward. So we always want to lift at the end because that's important. The little trick that I used to use all the time is I would put in, and I wouldn't say it, I would just put in comma and then the word stupid. But I would just think that. I wouldn't actually say that. Hi, I'm Ron Hennigan. I'm the director of education. Stupid. So that it gave me a little way just to make sure that I was saying it all the way through the end of the line. Okay. The next thing I said is I believe, right? I gave you the fact, obviously the first. I gave the 18,000 students. You probably don't remember the in-school residencies or the student matinees or the studio, but you remembered 18,000, which is terrific, because then I could tell you how we serve those 18,000 students every year, right? So that's a very logical way of looking at things. That's a number. Here's my job. I serve these many people. Done. The second thing, as I said, is what I believed in. So I like to tell people that if I had a business card, the business card would say Ron Hennigan, artist, educator, director. And so the director part is my director of education. The educator part, that middle part, that lifelong learning, that's important to me. And I believe that. And so when I say I believe, that comes from here. It comes from the chest. There's a certain kind of resonance that happens in here. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So what do I feel in here in my heart? What is it that I love? And then the last thing I said is that I know. And we use this phrase all of the time. We say, there's something I know so deep in my soul, we sometimes say, or I can feel it in my gut. And so I deliberately took my voice down to, I know that there is nothing more powerful. Because that part of the voice is my gut voice. And it's distinguished from the one that I use up here when I'm talking to people who say, hi, everybody, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. I'm using top resonators for that. And then I move in the middle for, this is what we believe, that lifelong learning enriches us all. And then I move down further into my gut for, but we know that a group of people in a room together, breathing the same air, hearing immortal stories, personal, public, tragedy, comedy, theaters, churches, all of those moments are ones that have shaped us for thousands of years. So all I've done is I've moved through 3 different parts of the body, and I've also used, Lakey probably knows this, so here you go, Lakey, you know this as well. How do we persuade people? Yes, if you took standard rhetoric at some point in your career, you use them, which is ethos, pathos, and logos. Logos is the logical thing. There's a cause and effect. I'm the director of education. I serve 18,000 students a year. Bip, bip, right? Then there's probably the, okay, well then the ethos then is probably the, oh, that's a belief system, right? That's the essence of something I believe in, right? I believe in lifelong learning. Right here from my chest and my heart. That's what keeps my heart beating because I believe it. And then finally, pathos, the thing that is our emotional center, how we connect with each other, that we make an argument, and we manipulate people emotionally by preying on the fact that don't we all feel this? It's not something that we accept as sort of standard ethical behavior, but it's something that we know, right? We know that when we go see somebody graduation, that's a huge moment in that person's life, and we're gathered together. We know that it's important, even over the past year where we've seen so many friends or colleagues or even acquaintances pass away, that families are looking for some way for us all to come together so that then we can be there and hear stories and feel that presence of one another. Okay, So that is your job. That's your assignment. And Zach said to me, I said, look, Zach, when we're all done with this, it would be great if people wanted a back and forth with me as sort of an individual, that we do just that. That you talk to me and you say, Ron, let's schedule a time next week because I want to give you my, this is who I am and this is what I do and this is what I believe and this is what I know. Lakey, you talked about 5 things. I think that's great. I think it's easier just to put it to 3 and then you can switch some out if you want. What do you believe, right? What do you think? What do you believe? And what do you know? And then if you want to check in with me at some point in the future, that's assignment 1. Okay, any questions about that? No, I'm going to move on if that's okay, Zach.
Great.
Great. How the voice works. Lakey talked about it a little bit, but let's just talk about physiologically what happens, all right? Couple quick things happen. It's probably about 10 points, but I'll just sort of distill it down for you. You have an impulse in your brain. That impulse in your brain connects to your breath. And what happens is that then the breath is going to move into the body and then it's going to move out of the body. That impulse and that breath, but we think that the impulse also affects the vocal cords. So as the breath comes out of the body, your vocal cords oscillate. And as they oscillate, they create vibrations. Those vibrations then find different resonators in the body. And finally, after the resonating has happened, they find articulation through usually, the main articulators are the lips and the teeth and the tongue. Sometimes the jaw, but really the lips, the teeth, and the tongue. Those are our articulators. That's the physiologically way that we actually say something. But public speaking, we all know, is a little bit different, right? We have to have something to say. And dare I say, we have to be first. We have to have something to say, and we have to know how we want to say that something. There has to be someone to receive it. There's got to be someone that hears it. And all we're doing in that is we are communicating how we think and how we feel. Why? So that there can be a change. They can learn from me, right? They can buy my product. They can know about our organization, right? They can use us. Whatever sort of transaction needs to happen, there has to be a change, right? So that's the goal. All right, simple, easy. All right, this part of the exercise is where we get a little bit more workshoppy. And as I speak to you now from downtown Baltimore in the studio, just so you know, I'm standing up and I have plenty of room around me. And that may not be available to you, which is absolutely fine. So if you can, this is the only time, and Zach, you'll back me up on this, this is the only time where you can mute and you can turn off your camera. Because you don't have to participate in these exercises. But if you are, I don't want there to be any judgment about what you're physically doing, okay? I'm gonna keep my camera on. So you guys can look at me and go, look at that guy. I can't believe he's doing that. And we're recording this session, right? Because I do this all the time, all right? Let's start with something very basic. I'm gonna get up on my feet. I encourage you to do the same. I usually just start by warming up my hands because I wanna get rid of these because these aren't the most important things for this process. So I usually warm them up. What I then do is then I move into sort of my shoulders. So my hands are warm, and then I start doing some shoulders just to kind of work them out a little bit. Again, how you're dressed right now might influence how you're doing this. You may be thinking, Ron, I have to do this for a presentation. I'm gonna drive to a location. I say, yeah, you're gonna have to do it in your car. You're gonna have to loosen up your shoulders in your car, right? I then start moving into my hips. I make sure that I can move my hips around in a clockwise or a counterclockwise. Why? Because I know that breath is going to come into my body that then it's going to have to leave it. So I want to make sure that my body is going to be ready for anything that I could possibly say. Okay. Good. So we just do something to loosen up a little bit of our trunk. I'm a big fan of dropping down your spine. Okay. You're going to watch me disappear in a moment. I'm going to do this from the side because what I like to do is I like to take the skull and say, all right, the skull is not important. So I'm going to get rid of it. My chin is going to go to my chest. Then what happens is I start to uncoil my spine from the top so that the top vertebra of my spine will start to disengage. and disengage. And slowly I'll get to the middle part of my back, and I'll keep disengaging and disengaging and disengaging until, boom, I'm hanging from my tailbone. Now I use all kinds of different images for this idea. Sometimes I use a wilting flower, right? The flower wilts at the top and then it works its way down, right? The ice sculpture, it starts to melt and then it gives way. So whatever image you'd like to use right now of getting your feet about shoulder width apart, dropping your chin to your chest, and then allowing the head to get heavier and heavier as you basically relax your spine and you're hanging from essentially your tailbone. I'd like you to build back up, but I'd like you to build from the bottom. The image I like to use for this is maybe a stack of quarters that you used to use in the laundry room, or a stack of poker chips that you slowly start to put up. Or for those of you of age, the slinky that slowly comes back up. I want you just to relax that spine. Terrific. So we did some body work and we did a little bit of spine work, okay? Now let's deal with what I call the resonators, okay? Let's deal with the ones that are way deep down, okay? There's a great little sound and movement exercise I like to do with this. So this is where I'm gonna do a little call and response. I'm gonna make a noise, I'm gonna do a physical action. I welcome you to try it as well, right? First thing I do is I put my hands on my hips, I'm gonna adjust my camera. I put my hands on my hips and I right down in here and I make an ooh sound and I go, ooh, and everybody does that, ooh. I now take the next vowel sound that I have. I drop my jaw and I go, oh. And everybody can do that. Oh, right? Then I come right in here where the sternum is and I go, guh. And I make a real strong guh sound. I've got a G, but then it's followed by an It's an absolute explosion of air, guh, right? Then I can come into this chest area and I can go, ha. I can use hands, I can use fists, right? The idea that you can go, ooh, 3, 5, 4, bum, right? But right in there, ha, right? I can move into my jaw now and I can do fa. Now I'm purposely releasing the jaw, fa. I'm getting the F sound that's happening with my teeth and my lips, fa. But then I'm dropping the jaw as I do it, fa. Now I'm doing a nice little ha. If you're hearing that I'm going from a low sound and I'm slowly coming up. So I'm in this area of ha, and then I'm gonna do some nice plosive sounds by going ba, de. So you're sort of saying body, but you're not really articulating it very well. Ba, de. The B and the D articulators, right, use the lips and they use the tongue, ba, de. You feel the D, you feel your tongue against the top of your roof of your mouth, right along the hard palate, right? Ba, de. Now I'm gonna move up into this area. And for a moment, let's just take our hands and let's just go ahead and warm up our cheeks. Again, having your cameras off is nice. Warm up your cheeks, nobody else's. Into your nose, just to get a nice smoothness across here. Realize that, you know, most of the time in wintertime, when your sinuses are clogged, people are like, okay, well, there's the nose, but then the sinuses are all back in here, right? You've got sinus cavities up here, you've got sinus cavities back in here. Those are open spaces, hopefully. Those are open spaces where sound can come out of. Everybody say, pay. Everybody, pay. You want this sound now coming out of this area, these resonators here, back in here in the sinuses. And then just like our friends at Monty Python, we're gonna make that sound that is right here on our nose, begins with N. We're gonna say, nee, nee. Now, a nice nasal sound are ones that you hear all the time if you're listening to sort of some of those old, either old television shows or you're listening to old radio. And that's because the people that were speaking them had that part of their voice that they trained oh so well. Hey, everybody, welcome to evening. This is the Mercury News Hour. And they had that sound up in there. Why? Because it resonates with not a lot of volume. That's the same thing that if you were walking through an open air market and somebody was saying, strawberries, raspberries, fresh fruit, that would be coming out of that part in the nasal and the sinus and the head resonators. Why? Because that way they don't have to yell. You don't want to be right next to that person and have them screaming, strawberries, raspberries, fresh fruit. You want it to be nice and light, okay? Everybody saying, me, right? And then finally, we're gonna go all the way up to the top of our skull. We're gonna go, kee. That's why we mute ourselves on these calls. Kee. We went from the lowest sound, zoo. We did ah, we did gus, right? We did all of these sounds, ha, right? Ba, right? Ba, day. Kee. All the way to the top. Why? Just to make sure that we are making a range of different sounds for our voice. Wonderful. Okay, good. Great. So we did some articulators, we did some resonators, we did a little bit of ethos, pathos, and logos. I want to check how we are on time. And I have our second assignment. We good on time? All right.
We're good.
You're going to have to look, I believe, at the chat. So you could turn your cameras back on, please. And you can sit back at your computer like a normal person. And I put a little bit of Shakespeare just because it's in my wheelhouse. Plus, it also helps us with what we talked a little bit about today. This is a piece from Love's Labor's Lost, for those of you that care. Zachary, just so you know, there's no Ariel. I realized I couldn't use that because that would be too much like I was auditioning you. In this play, the men decide that they are going to forswear women. And what they are going to do is they took a vow, they took an oath that they would forswear women, that they wouldn't eat, that they wouldn't sleep, and that they would only study. That's what they were going to do. So they were going to live like monks. And no sooner have they made this vow than 4 women show up. And guess what happens? And so the leader of their bunch has to tell them, like, look, this was a terrible idea. And so if you would, look in the chat for just a moment. And he makes this argument to his friends. And you guys can read along with me. In fact, we can read it all together, right? Let's look at our chat. And Barun says, for wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men, or women's sake, by whom we men are men. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths. Okay, good. So we're going to practice this, and this will be the part where this is our unit that we're working on today, and you'll be graded. I have a very, very sliding scale. Wanda, don't look like, oh, this is terrible, I'm going to get graded on this. You're probably going to get at least a B+. Okay, let's look at the language first. Is there anything in there that we don't understand? Are there any words that we don't understand in that 5-line section? And if anyone doesn't understand it, that's absolutely fine. I want to try to answer anything, but most of the words are probably within our wheelhouse, right? For wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men, or for women's sake, by whom we men are men. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths. If you're paying attention, of course, those of you that were English majors in college, or remember, this is a poetical device, probably most famous in our dear friend, well, when Kennedy was inaugurated, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, right? Yes, there it is. A chiasmus, so is when you take words and you put them in different order to make a point. So let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths. Notice in those last 2 lines, 2 words are different, and it's the finders and the keepers, right? And so anytime you have that in what you're saying, you actually want to highlight that. So the last thing I would want to do is to say, let us once lose our oaths, find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves, our oaths. It's the find and the keep are the ones that I really want to emphasize because those are the two words that are different. Okay. Now, based on what we talked about, look at where, for wisdom's sake. Now, you could put it in the chat, or you could just think it out loud, or you can contribute if you want to say this. If I said to you, okay, where do you want to put that? Do you want to put that in your head? Do you want to put that in your heart? Or do you want to put that in your gut? For the logos, right? For the ethos or for the pathos? Where would you put, for wisdom's sake, a word that all men love? A couple people are pointing to their heads, Zach, which is fine. I'm on that. Karen wrote head. Thank you very much. I think so. I also like because we have wisdom. Everybody just say that word, wisdom. Now here's the ticket. Consonants establish your thought. Consonants equal thought. So of course, what I'm going to say next is so easy to remember. Vowels equal emotion. And my standard example I always use is that when you stand at the 4th of July celebration and you look up in the sky and something happens, you don't turn to the people next to you and say, you know, I particularly enjoyed the purple, how it manifested itself, and then it became iridescent. There was a loud sound that happened with it as well, and then it fizzled and it became white. That's not what happens. Instead, you go, oh, it's pure emotional sound. So vowels equal emotion and consonants equal thought. And the word wisdom has a nice little wisdom. We have all sort of we have a W consonant at the beginning, the W, and then we have a Z, and then we have a M. So we've actually exploded the word across of our face and then taken it back in. Wisdom. Everybody say that word, wisdom, wisdom. And then a word that all men love. So yeah, let's put that in our head. Okay, where do we go for love's sake? A word that loves all men. Where do we go for that? Do we go to the chest or do we go to the gut for that one? Chest, says Karen. Karen's getting an A, by the way. Wanda, where is it? Is it in your gut or is it in your chest? Now you can move it. I'm giving you free reign on this one. If you want to go ahead and make the case and go, you know what, Ron, for love's sake, I feel that in my soul, right? Or for love's sake, then do it. Put it down there. That's fine by me. And then finally, or women's sake, by whom we men are men, right? Well, there's, you can't do any Shakespeare, by the way, without having at least a tiny bit of sexual innuendo, right? Or women's sake, by whom we men are men, right? He's trying to make the point like, come on, it's so deep down inside of us. It's down in our pelvis. It's down in our belly, right? And Lakey, of course, will correct me on which chakra that is. Okay, good. And then we finish with us, let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths. This is terrific. Any questions about this? Because now is the time when we are going to, we're all going to get a chance to do a little bit. All right. So take me out of spotlight, please, Zach, if you wouldn't mind. Let's get a couple people to volunteer to go ahead and try this text. I'll give you some thoughts on it. But that's the handy dandy way. You want to do the first line up in your head, the next one in your chest, and the final one in your gut. And then all you have to do is make sure you get the find and the keep, right? Who would like to go first?
I'll do some reading.
Go ahead, Eric.
For wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men, or women's sake, by whom we men are men. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
Phenomenal. That was terrific. Great. Thank you very much. This is terrific. Eric, I want to make one change for you here a little bit. I really want you to kind of get down deep for or women's sake. And I want you to infuse it with something that is that is almost like, come on, guys, let's do it. I want to see that side of you that is just you and your pals talking. And so I really want to hear in that moment just how much you're down. Come on, let's do it. And it's okay if you kind of burn your voice a little bit, because you're not going to be loud, right? I'm not asking you to fill an entire stadium, all right? Just do the first 3 lines, but let me hear it really in that 3rd line. Go ahead again.
All right. For wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men, or women's sake, by whom we men are men.
There we go. Finish it since you're there.
Oh, well, I already put all my emotion and my gut into those 3 lines that you told me to go.
I know, but now's the payoff. Give it to us. Come on, do the last 2.
Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
Phenomenal. Great. You all heard how that different and how much that's more of him that's coming through, as opposed to, oh, I have to say this politely. There's nothing polite about anything that you're saying if you believe it, right? It's just a statement of truth. It's a statement of fact, right? All right, good. Who else is up?
I can do it.
Thank you, Wanda.
For wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men. Or or women's sake, by whom we men are men. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
Beautiful. That was great. Wanda, that's terrific. Wanda, you already have just such a reassuring, calming voice in and of yourself. So that's terrific the way that you did that. That's a very different approach, obviously, than what Eric did, but that's clearly who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, terrific. That's awesome. Thank you. Who else is up? Come on, we only have 2 minutes. Karen, you're up.
Here we go. Put my glasses on. For wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men, or women's sake, by whom we men are men. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
That's terrific. Now, good. Now, Karen, while you're there, just take a look at those last 2 lines.
Okay.
Right? And so can you just say the last 2 lines again?
Sure. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
Good. Okay, good. Can you close your eyes and can you say that line without reading it? Have you memorized it now?
Sure. The last one you mean, or?
Yeah, just the last 2. Let us once lose our oaths. Ready? Go ahead. Shut your eyes.
Let us once lose our oaths. I forgot the line, to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
Terrific. Now, I want you to open your eyes. And now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to use gesture. So you've got the glasses on. I'd like you to say, let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves.
Okay.
So use a powerful gesture there. So take the glasses off when you say, lose our oaths. Ready?
Okay. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths.
Beautiful, great. We didn't talk about gesture in terms of presence, in terms of what you do, but certainly the things that you have become these props that you use to obviously help your case, to point something out, to answer a question, to go, that's a great point. All of the things that we do that we use naturally, we have personal props with us at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Great, I'm out of time, but the challenge is the same to all of you. Please, if you want, avail yourselves to me at some point over the next few weeks. I'll do a little plug here. We're back. We're out at the PFI this summer in the ruins in Howard County. We're doing the Adventures of Pericles. It opens in a month. July 2nd, well, July 1st is what I think we preview, and then we open officially on the 2nd. So if you don't already have, you could go to our website and you can look up Chesapeke Shakespeare. We're doing the Adventures of Pericles. It's a very crazy tale of shipwrecks, and it's going to be a very fun play. And obviously we have, it's outdoors, we'll be socially distant, and free kids for every paying adult. So we still have that policy. So join us for that. But between now and then, please, dial me up and give me your intro, and I can help you with it, just so that we could further the conversation. Wanda and Karen, and obviously Eric, thank you for going and participating today. I don't have anything else. Zach, is there anything else you want me to cover?
Nope, just the best way to contact you is that by LinkedIn, or what would you prefer to share?
Oh, here, I'll give you my email address. That's in the chat, but you can look me up online at ChesapeakeShakespeare.com. That looks about right. And that's my last.
Perfect. And so Hennigan at ChesapeakeShakespeare.com.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Great. Ron, thank you so much. This was really just a lot of fun to be able to do that. And thank you to everyone who stuck around the extra 15 minutes or so. I know that we don't typically go longer than an hour, so I'm grateful for everyone who stuck around and who participated and engaged, whether you were on or off camera for that. Thank you for, again, our sponsors who, without whom we can't do this. And the Chamber has those other upcoming events. Certainly feel free to check out their website if you'd like to join in on one of the other future events. As far as a final piece here too, we have YPN has typically 6 mixers a year, 3 or 4 professional development events like this. And we're actually doing a Young Professionals Summit this year as well. So again, you can check out all of that information on the Chamber's website, howardchamber.com. All right, thank you again, everyone. It was a pleasure to see so many of you, and I'm really grateful for everyone who, again, came, engaged, and to our speakers, Ron and Lakey. All right, have a good day, everyone.